Hello, everyone. Hello, my name is Heather Jarvis. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you to the Texas Access to Justice Foundation for making this available to everyone today, for asking me to do it and bringing us together, and for being so inclusive and inviting folks today. So thanks so much goes to the Texas Access to Justice Foundation. With that said, we've got a lot of exciting stuff to cover today. Let me start with just a couple of housekeeping items. We are recording the session, and you will receive a link to the recording about an hour after the session is over. Also, there is a handout in the handout panel for you, and it's just a copy of these visual aids. So if you want to review the information that I show on screen, you have access to it. And then finally, I dropped a bunch of URLs into the chat for all of the best official resources that have loads more detail even than what we're going to cover today. So if you don't get your question answered, or if you're looking for more stuff, that is where you should go to find it. So my name is Heather Jarvis. I'm an attorney, and I have been working on student debt relief for more than a dozen years. Before that, I was a public interest lawyer representing clients, and it is my pleasure to bring you some exciting information about student loans. So, and Becky's saying she does not see the links in the chat. I dropped them in at about 1:05, but let me just drop them in again because sometimes, I mess things up, right? So you should see them now in the chat. All right, great. So Mariah, I will get to your question here in just a minute, and I'm going to do a couple introductory things first, but then I will definitely look at questions periodically as we go. So what we're going to talk about today, we're going to cover the COVID-19 payment suspension, which is coming to an end at the end of the year, and what you can and should do about that to prepare. We're going to talk about the president's one-time debt cancellation that he has announced and that is in progress. We'll talk about what you need to do to benefit from that. We're going to spend a fair amount of time talking about the public service loan forgiveness waiver, which is very exciting, but is time limited, and you may need to take actions. You do need to take actions if you're in public service before Halloween, before the end of October. I want to mention some of the new rules that have been proposed for public service loan forgiveness. We'll talk a little bit about a new income-driven repayment plan that's been announced. We don't have a ton of detail on that. And I'll refer you to some information about this fresh start for people who are in a default situation on their student loans. We will not talk much about default today, but I will direct you for where you can get some more information. Many of the things I say will apply differently to people who are facing default than they do for others. So bear in mind that for the most part, my expectation is that that is not the circumstance of most of the folks attending today. I should also say for the recording that today is September 22nd, 2022. We only know what we know today, and these things are moving pretty quickly. So it could be that some of the things I talk about have changed over time. All right, so let's go right ahead. So payments really are going to start back up in January. The pandemic payment suspension has been extended several times since March of 2020, but it is not going to be further extended. Payments are going to resume in January. So what you ought to do now is make sure that your contact information is fully up to date in a couple of different places. Go to the studentaid.gov site, which is the best comprehensive resource for reliable and official information. Log in there and go to your profile and check and see that they have your email address, that they have your cell phone number, and that your notification settings are set properly so that you're getting stuff when you need it. So like if you're set to get email notifications, make sure it's an address that you do check because there's stuff that you're going to want to hear about, and that's the way you're going to hear it. You should also go to your loan servicing company's website. The federal government and other lenders hire companies that service our loans, and they're called servicers. So many of us have been assigned recently to MOHELA. That's an acronym, stands for Missouri Higher Education Loan Authority. Some of you may also be with other servicers like Great Lakes or Navient or Nelnet or FedLoan. And you should update your contact information on their website as well. So in both places, check your contact info. Then if you are a recent graduate, if you graduated any time or left school during the pandemic, you may never have had to choose a repayment plan. So you're going to want to give some thought to which plan is best for you. The income-driven repayment plans are a good place to look. When I say income-driven repayment, that's an umbrella term, and it is meant to encompass the several distinct plans that fall under that rubric. So there's under income-driven repayment plans, there's two kinds of income-based repayment. There's something called income contingent repayment, pay as you earn, revised pay as you earn. They have subtle distinctions. There are many ways in which they are quite similar. The essential of those plans is that they establish your payments according to your income instead of according to your balance. So if you find payments to be unmanageable, the income-driven repayment plans are a good place to look. You will be told at least 3 weeks before you have to make a payment. You're supposed to get notice 21 days ahead of time or more from your loan servicer. And so expect to hear something in December or January about when your actual payment is due. And if your income has gone down since you last updated it, and you're enrolled in an income-driven plan, you can update your income and have your payment amount recalculated. You're not required to update your income until the servicing company tells you to do so. And so if your income has gone up, it's not in your best interest to do that until you are prompted to do so. And it's a little unclear to me right now when people are going to be asked to do that. There's going to have to be some sort of a phase in, because the servicers can't have us all doing it immediately in January, or the system would be unable to process that. I'm a little concerned that it'll be somewhat bumpy because things typically are in the student loan system. It's rather bloated and difficult, and there's been a lot of changes recently. So let's talk about President Biden's student loan debt relief plan. And then I will start getting to some of your questions as well. So the president has announced a one-time student loan cancellation. Side note, the word cancellation, I had to look it up. I wasn't sure the right way to spell it. Apparently it's correct either with one L or with two L's. So you don't have to know how to spell it. However you think it is probably right. So I was like, all right, that works for me. The president has announced either $20,000 or $10,000 in loan cancellation for people with federal student loans, federal direct student loans, for those who meet income threshold requirements of $125,000 for single borrowers, or $250,000 for married folks. What we should do now to benefit from this forgiveness is we should go and read the stuff at the studentaid.gov debt relief announcement if you want more detail. You can look at your tax returns to see if you meet the income threshold. And I'm going to show you how to review whether or not you got a Pell Grant when you were in school, which is what determines if you get 10 or 20,000. Also, and I did put this URL in the chat as well, subscribe for updates at the Department of Education site. I'll show you a screenshot of that. And as soon as the application comes out, which we're told will be early October, we'll get notification, and then we should all apply immediately. And yes, I'm concerned that the website will go down because this is how it always goes. But I am also concerned it's possible that something could happen to delay, postpone, or derail the president's plan. There are some on the far right who don't like it at all, and there's been a threat of lawsuits from various state attorneys general, including the Texas Attorney General and governors from various states, that they may sue to stop this from happening. Now, there's problems with standing, and so you have to, in order to sue, you have to have a stake in the outcome of the controversy, and so it's not clear who would have standing as is required to sue. But there are those who are very interested in trying to find plaintiffs in order to sue. Even if lawsuits are filed, it's not certain that a judge would prevent the forgiveness from going forward, but they could. They could postpone the actual cancellation of debt potentially, which is why it is smart to apply right away, because it is a lot harder to undo forgiveness that has already happened than it is to prevent it from happening. So apply as soon as you can. Okay. And what you want to do to be notified of when the application is available is to subscribe to the Federal Student Loan Borrower Updates on the Department of Education website, ed.gov/subscriptions. Don't do like me and subscribe for all of them, and then you'll get all kinds of stuff you don't want. But the Federal Student Loan Borrower Updates should be few and far between in things that are of interest to you, like the availability of the application for loan cancellation. To the extent that you have interest in talking to anyone about the policies behind these programs, the Pell Grant recipients who will be eligible for the larger $20,000 cancellation almost all come from families who make less than $60,000 or did when they were students. And the overwhelming majority of families earned less than $30,000. So in my view, the relief is well targeted. If you're not sure whether you got a Pell Grant or not, you can look it up at the Student Aid site. I've got some screenshots here of my own account. You're just going to first log in using your federal Student Aid username and password. And again, these screenshots are on the handout, which is the same as these visual aids. And these are my remaining loans listed here. And you can actually see both loans and grants. But if you click to view details, there's then a grants tab that you can click. And this shows like all the older loans I had to begin with. And then that's where you can see whether you got a Pell Grant or not. If you got even one Pell Grant for any year that you were in school, that makes you eligible potentially for the larger $20,000 amount if you meet the income requirement. And most of the debt cancellation is expected to go to people making less than $75,000 a year, even though the income limits are somewhat higher than that. I, for one, am quite concerned that because there is an income limit and that requires an application and submission of documentation of income, I'm concerned that the most needy among us may not get access to these benefits as they should, because they won't necessarily hear about it in time or take the actions that are necessary or have access to the internet or resources in order to apply and receive the forgiveness. So leaders, including yourselves, should, if possible, plan to work to assist others in accessing this relief. What I don't want to see happen is having all the most sophisticated borrowers get online and get their $10,000 canceled, whereas people who need it most fall through the cracks. And so we should all try to contribute to that happening well. You can tell whether you meet the income limit just by looking at your tax return. And we've been told that they're going to look at either 2020 or 2021 federal tax return. And if either of those shows that you meet that income limit, then you are good to go as far as that is. And you can look at your 1040 form, line 11 there. If you're single, then again, it needs to be under 125,000. If you're married, it needs to be under 250,000 together. And I'm just going to turn to talking about public service loan forgiveness, but first I will look and see if we have any questions about the about this forgiveness. I'm just skipping a couple because I want to get the details of PSLF out before we address the more nuanced questions. But Marcella is asking whether this relief, the one-time student debt cancellation, the 10 or 20, whether that covers parent plus loans. Yes, it does. A parent may have a $10,000 or $20,000 canceled. If the parent received a Pell Grant, she can get $20,000 for her if she would have received it for her own education. If she did not, $10,000, but it can be for Parent Plus loans. That's correct. Heather asks, she did her loan borrowing in law school, but she got a Pell Grant as an undergrad and wondering if she still qualifies for the higher amount. Yes, Heather, my understanding is that yes, you do, that if you had a Pell Grant period, because Pell Grants are only available for undergraduate school, they're typically not available for graduate programs. And I have not seen any distinction that requires that you have borrowed in undergraduate school. So that's my answer to that, although I haven't seen it directly addressed by the official stuff. Jesse's asking if there's guidance about whether the forgiveness will go to interest loans or deferred loans. There's some more detail about that, Jesse, and I'll refer you to that URL that is the studentaid.gov/debt relief announcement. And in fact, I can drop just that particular one back in the chat. There is some information there about how the forgiveness will be applied, so we don't get to decide, unfortunately. There is a hierarchy of how they're going to do it. Same goes, Dave, for you as far as how it will be allocated. And I think there's still some amount of advocacy that we can do for that. So John, I think I answered your question about a Pell Grant. My understanding is that if you ever got a Pell Grant, you're eligible for up to $20,000 of cancellation on your loans. Judith had the same question. It doesn't matter whether it's undergraduate or law loans that you have. If you got a Pell Grant, you're eligible for up to $20,000 of cancellation. Okay. And I'm going to go on for a little bit, and then I'm also going to get some more questions here in just a moment. So public service loan forgiveness has been difficult, to say the least. The statutory requirements were elaborate and convoluted. The regulatory requirements made it even more so. And then the servicing companies did a very poor job at telling people the right information and at administering the program. So it has been extremely problematic for folks. And that's why it was acknowledged that borrowers were, really struggling, because some people needed to consolidate older federal loans and were not told that, or if they were told that there was misinformation or difficulty in actually carrying that out. Also, forbearances, the loan servicers have had a tendency to steer people into forbearances, which are temporary postponements of our obligation to pay. And under public service loan forgiveness, the way it was supposed to work is that if you made 120 qualifying monthly payments, 120 being the months that are included in 10 years, that you would get cancellation of any remaining balance. But if you were in a forbearance, you weren't making payments or weren't required to make payments. Even if you did make payments, they weren't counted. People weren't told that if they made payments, that were $1 short or a day late, they weren't getting credit. They weren't told the importance of choosing an income-driven plan and certifying their employment to get forgiveness. And so because of these problems in the program and in the system, the Department of Education has announced a waiver of some of the more stringent requirements. So right now, and for a limited time, we can apply and have a relaxed set of rules applied that can improve the progress towards forgiveness that many borrowers have. Some people who have been out of school for a long time may get all the way to 120 months and receive cancellation of their remaining balances. But public service loan forgiveness requires full-time paid work for a 501c3 nonprofit organization, a few other narrowly defined nonprofit organizations, as well as a vast array of government work, state, local, federal, tribal government, as well as agencies and entities are qualifying employers. So if you're someone who has worked in public service or is working in public service, as I just defined it, you need to take actions now and before October 31st in order to benefit from the terms of the waiver. And I'm going to take you through and show you sort of how you can figure out what to do or what you need to do. And so let's begin with that, and then I will turn to some questions. So under the terms of the waiver, we are going to get credit for stuff we couldn't have gotten credit for before. And this is why it's essential that you take action before Halloween, because you are now able to get credit for months that you wouldn't have gotten credit for before. It's any months where you were in what we call a repayment status, even if you didn't make a payment, or if you made a partial payment, or if you made a payment under the so-called wrong repayment plan, or on the wrong kind of loan, like one of those older federal family education loans. In order to address the issue of forbearance that I mentioned, we're now going to be able to get credit for certain periods of forbearance in our past loan history. What they're looking for is 12 or more consecutive months. So if you were in a forbearance for 13 months, one after another, they will count that period of forbearance. The reason they came up with that 12 months is that the loan servicers were not supposed to let us be in forbearance for longer than 12 months, but they did, and they shouldn't have, and it wasn't good for us for them to have allowed it. Similarly, if borrowers have 36 or more cumulative months on their record, if you've got more than 36 months of forbearance, they're going to count that period of time. And that's, again, because there was meant to be a 3-year limit on how much forbearance people could get, but that was not properly enforced. Some periods of deferment will count before the year 2013, except for the in-school deferment. So many of us, like if you borrowed undergraduate loans and then graduated and your grace period of 6 months expired, that's the period before payments are required, and you entered repayment, then if you later return to a graduate or professional program, those undergraduate loans would have been put into an in-school deferment status where no payments were required. Those months will not be counted even under the terms of the waiver. And importantly, and very different than previous guidance, is that if you had loans that you had been in a repayment status for while you were working in public service, and then you consolidated those loans, you can get credit for the time you were in repayment and working before the consolidation. And that did not used to be true. Many of us have been warned. I have done the warning of people that, hey, if you consolidate loans that have credit towards forgiveness on them, you won't be able to have the credits that you had earned. They would be wiped out by the consolidation. That's not true right now. For a limited time, you can consolidate, or if you already consolidated, you can get credit for months you spent working in public service before that consolidation. That is huge. And the consolidation loan will get credit for the maximum number of months of any of the underlying loans. So I'm often asked, if I have loans I need to consolidate and other loans I don't need to consolidate, should I include all the loans in the consolidation? I think the answer to that is yes now through October 31st, because we have been told that the consolidation loan will be credited with the maximum number of months towards forgiveness. So that is a good thing for student loan borrowers. Now I'm going to go into the detail about how to figure out if you're someone who needs to consolidate, and I'm about to do that. But I wanted to take a few more questions first. Mariah was the first to weigh in and asked about the first step to taking advantage of the waiver. So Mariah, the first step is to determine if you need to consolidate. We're going to show how you need to do that. And then if you don't need to consolidate, don't consolidate. If you do need to, do. And then there is another step, which is to file something called the PSLF form. And I'm going to show you all the details of that as well for any of the employers that you've had since your loans were in repayment after October 2007 when the program first started. Renee has been looking at the websites, and she was recommended to consolidate it and was wondering if there are disadvantages to doing that. So she's getting some of the warnings that are attendant to the consolidation application, like saying that, like, hey, if you get a consolidation, they're going to enter a repayment. They're going to enter repayment right away, and you're going to have to start making payments. Renee, that's not exactly true right now, because even though a consolidation loan normally does require payments right away, the pandemic payment suspension will still apply to the new consolidation loan. So that warning is temporarily suspended through the end of the calendar year. Payments don't resume until January. And so you do not need to worry about having to make payments on the consolidation loan right away. In fact, you should definitely do it before October 31st. Pablo asked about a settlement that resulted in Navient discharging and canceling certain student loans, and was wondering if there was anything similar happening for Nelnet or the other servicers. What Pablo is referring to is there's been various lawsuits against some of these servicers because of their practices, and the Navient suit was particularly about private student loans and the way that they were handling those. There are often, Pablo, lawsuits, and they typically tend to be filed by attorneys general against the loan servicing companies. I'm not tracking one right now against Nelnet, but that doesn't mean there isn't one, or that you wouldn't benefit. So I would refer you to, honestly, what I would do to find it out is I would go to a Google search, and I would be searching things like lawsuit and Nelnet, and it should come up if there is such a thing. Renee said she read that the 10-year forgiveness only applies if you have undergraduate loans. No, wrong. And that you have to make payments for 20 years if you have graduate loans. No, so public service loan forgiveness is available for all different kinds of federal direct student loans. So if you have loans that are federal loans but that are not direct, you'll need to consolidate, and we're going to go through that here in a moment. But it doesn't matter if they were for undergraduate school or graduate school. It doesn't matter if you graduated or not. It doesn't matter if your job is related to your degree. If you work full-time for pay for a qualifying public service employer, nonprofit, government employer, during the period of time that your loans are in repayment, under normal public service loan forgiveness rules, you would have to choose an income-driven repayment plan and make these income-driven payments every month for 10 years. And it could take longer than 10 years for you to successfully make 120 qualifying payments. For example, if you had, changed jobs and had a couple months where your payments didn't count because you weren't working in public service. What may be confusing to some, and what some of the things that Renee may have seen in places, are that there's other kinds of forgiveness in addition to public service loan forgiveness. Public service loan forgiveness can happen in as little as 10 years, 120 qualifying payments. But the income-driven repayment options also have cancellation provisions that are not tied to your employment. So, and some of the plans do have a 20-year cancellation. And I think maybe what Renee is referring to is the pay-as-you-earn repayment option is one. It's an income-driven plan. It can get somebody to public service loan forgiveness in as little as 10 years. Or if a person enrolled in pay as you earn does not earn public service loan forgiveness, like for example, because they're not employed in that kind of job for 10 years, then there's still an opportunity for loan forgiveness that's not tied to employment. And under pay as you earn, it's 20 years. Under revised pay as you earn, it's 20 years for people who didn't have any graduate or professional loans, who only borrowed for undergraduate school. Whereas if they borrowed for graduate school or law school, under the revised pay as you earn plan, the long-term forgiveness that's not tied to employment takes 25 years. So it is the case that there are sometimes it's 20 and sometimes it's 25. But does not mean that you can't get the 10-year forgiveness. You can, but you have to meet the employment requirement. Okay, awesome. All right, Valerie says, usually she resubmits the form to recalculate income-based repayment and hasn't been doing it, so she's not sure when she needs to resubmit the form. Yeah, Valerie, there's no need for you to do it right away. If your income has gone down from where it was the last time you submitted it, you could do that in order to have it calculated lower. But if your income has stayed the same or gone up, wait until you're prompted to do it. But then do make sure that you are getting the communications from your loan servicer so you know when it's time to do it. And lots of folks want to know if the 10 and 20K debt cancellation can apply to graduate loans. Yes, it can apply to graduate loans. It can apply for Parent Plus loans. Elizabeth wants to know when to apply for forgiveness. So for the 10 and 20K one-time cancellation that President Biden announced, the application is meant to be released in October, early October, we're told, and we should apply right away, although we're told we have through the whole year of December, not December is not a year, it's a month, right? Through the whole year of 2023 to December 2023 to apply for that one-time cancellation. When it comes to public service loan forgiveness, you want to document your employment periodically with this PSLF form that I'm going to show you. And then you also apply for forgiveness once you hit the 120 payments that are required, and you do that using the same form. Dave asks whether the loan cancellation is available for borrowers who are still in school. It is, Dave. In fact, we've been told that the loan cancellation can apply to any debt that was borrowed before June 30th, 2022. So brand new students who are matriculating like this fall will not be able to borrow loans that are forgivable. They'll be able to borrow loans, but they won't get 10 or 20K canceled. But any debt that was borrowed before June 30th, even if someone is currently a student, is eligible for this cancellation. And yes, Estefana, it is fine for graduate school debts. You can use it for that. And Jesse asks whether consolidating loans together affects eligibility. It does not. You can get the loan cancellation in any event. Also with public service loan forgiveness, you can get that too. So Diana, if you are filing your tax return married filing separately, you would need to have that separate income on your separate married filing separately status be 125,000 or less than 125,000. And it really doesn't matter if you have graduate loans. It doesn't matter if you already paid off your undergraduate loans. As long as you've got a Pell Grant, you're eligible for 20,000 cancellation. William asks if FFEL loans held by companies like Navient will qualify for cancellation. No. If you have those older FFEL loans, you need to consolidate into direct, because the federal government can't forgive commercially held loans, even though they are federally guaranteed. Most FFEL loans, with some exceptions, are commercially held, meaning that banks and private lenders are the ones who own the loans. Even though if they don't get paid, the federal government will pay them. So you will need to take the steps that I'm about to go through here. And I am going to go through some more slides, and then I'm going to get some more questions. And I certainly hope that the heavy equipment that they seem to be unloading on my curb for my neighbor's trees is not going to make things really loud for us in just a second. Okay, so I have this labeled as how to check whether you need to consolidate for the waiver, but you would also need to do this if you have these older loans and you want to get the one-time cancellation. So I've got some screenshots to go through, but you need to consolidate loans that do not say the word direct in the loan type. So we're back at the studentaid.gov site. We're logged in. We're at that dashboard page. We're going to click View Details, and then we're going to click View Breakdown. Once we click View Breakdown, we're going to again drill down to view the loan details. And you'll see this is when this summer I finally reconsolidated into direct for the reasons that we've talked about today. These are my accounts, and so what I had was a Federal Family Education Loan Program consolidation loan. Doesn't say the word direct in the name of that loan, so it's not a direct loan. It might say Perkins, or it might say unsubsidized, or it might say plus, but if it doesn't say direct, if it says direct, it's direct. If it doesn't say direct, it needs to be consolidated to be eligible for this cancellation. And here we go with the noise. Sorry about that, y'all. The other thing you need to do that's super important is file this PSLF form. We used to call it the Employment Certification Form. And it's really smart to use this help tool they now have at the studentaid.gov site. It's studentaid.gov/PSLF. And this help tool is linked to a database of already vetted public service employers. So even if you've already filed these forms before, if they've been granted or denied or granted in part or not, you should file them again unless you've done so recently, because this triggers the review of your loan history according to the relaxed rules of the waiver. And so this is what you want. And the way to do it is to visit that website I said, studentaid.gov/PSLF, and then you're going to be populating with that tool this form, which you will then need to print. There is a box at the bottom. If you can't get a signature from an employer, you can check that box, but don't do it unless you absolutely cannot get it signed, because that is going to slow things down for you and be a huge pain. The big thing is that you click this little plus add employer thingy that you'll see, and you need to have the federal employer ID number, the FEIN. And when you plug that in, you can see a list of the employers that come up with that FEIN. It's on your W-2, by the way, in box B if you're looking for it, or you can ask your employers. Most nonprofits, you can even find it online. The joys of living in this suburb where everyone has a tractor and busts it out when you're trying to do a big webinar for the people of Texas and elsewhere. So this form is not actually electronic, so you're going to end up having to print it and sign it and get it signed and then submit it. And you'll see that it requires a so-called wet signature, which means that it's not a digital certificate and it's not the kind that you type in and it converts it to a font. And that is a requirement, otherwise it will be kicked out. So super important that everybody plan to determine if you need to consolidate if necessary, file the consolidation application at studentaid.gov before October 31st. It doesn't have to be finished processing by then, it just has to be submitted by then. And then file these PSLF forms also by October 31st. You'll see that the forms are meant to be submitted to MOHELA, the new Public Service Loan Forgiveness Servicer. And a lot of us are having our accounts transferred to MOHELA now from FedLoan or from other servicing companies. And so there's a bit of a weirdness with the transition where there may be a moment where nobody exactly has your student loans because they're in transit. So if you can create an account at MOHELA because your loans are there, then create an account at MOHELA and upload the form to your profile. And it says how to do this, or it says that you can do this on the form. If you are not with MOHELA, then you will have to fax the form to MOHELA. You can also snail mail it, but I would fax it and do it before October 31st. It doesn't have to be processed by then. It has to be submitted by then. And then you'll want to keep an eye on it after that. In general, it's smart to be skeptical of your loan servicer's ability to do a good job with your student loans. So it's vital that you look at your records periodically because you care about your loans more than anybody else does. And the rules are what they are, but they are not always applied consistently or correctly. And we can usually solve some of these problems if we find them soon enough. But what's problematic is if you don't know that there's issues on your account. So, you know, what was it that I think it was Ronald Reagan said, like, trust but verify, or maybe that was George W. Bush, I forget. Somebody can tell me if you know. But I wouldn't even say trust but verify, I would just say, you know, verify. And before I talk about the new regs, let me just see what else we have as far as questions. Trevin wants to know if this is going to be available. Yes, so Trevin, there'll be a link to the recording sent to you automatically about an hour after the presentation. Alina applied for public service loan forgiveness a few months ago. And has been paying her loans for more than 10 years, but it was denied because she hadn't made income-based payments, and she was wondering, well, what is up with that? So it sounds like Alina, that the terms of the waiver have not been applied to you yet. Sometimes what we see happening, which is so confusing, is that they apply the old rules and deny you or give you some payment count, and then they start review. Then they do the review under the waiver, and they plus up your payment count. So what I would do is the steps I've already told you. Make sure those loans are direct. If your loans are with MOHELA, go and log in and see if they have that PSLF payment tracker. It shouldn't matter that you hadn't made income-based payments. So if you were making payments, any kind of payments, those should count. If you had forbearances, it may be that some count and some don't, depending on how the length of them and the others. So it is possible that they have done it incorrectly. One of the other things I put in the chat is how that you can submit a complaint to federal student aid. And also how you can contact the ombudsman. I'm going to put those two links back in the chat now. That's what you do if you've already had the terms of the waiver applied incorrectly. It may be that you need to recertify your employment. What I would do is check to make sure you have a MOHELA account, create the account. If they don't have your loans and FedLoan still has your loans, file those PSLF forms again, even if you've filed them before. Use the help tool. Make sure that you enter the employer using the help tool. And the reason that's important, it's important for several reasons. That's the official government United States Department of Education website, and it's different than the loan servicer. So that's where you get actual government officials from federal student aid, which is part of the Department of Education, to apply these relaxed rules. Because it sounds to me like you haven't gotten the review and the treatment under the review that you should yet. John wants to know if taking the one-time cancellation is going to negatively affect public service loan forgiveness. You know, the thing is it's not going to negatively affect it, but I mean, except insofar as if you get 10 grand canceled under one program, you're not going to get it canceled under the other program. But it also isn't going to really, you're not necessarily going to really feel it, because having a reduction in your balance doesn't reduce your payments under an income-driven plan. So you may not really feel the benefit of it. You're still going to have to make the same payments based on your income for the same length of time till you get the public service loan forgiveness. You'll just get somewhat less forgiven. So, you know, that's how that can work. Sita asks if you can get the 10 grand even if you qualify for 17,500 reduction for teaching in a low income school. So Sita, again, it's sort of similar to like what I was just talking with John about. There is nothing to prevent you from accessing both programs. So if you owe enough to get 10K canceled here and 17K canceled there, then great, do that. If you get 10K canceled and you don't still owe another 17, it's okay. You can get less than that canceled under the teacher loan forgiveness. But they shouldn't be any negative impact of accessing both programs unless it confuses the servicers, and you may have to, you know, sort of keep an eye on that. Esperanza asked if there's a specific amount of payments you must have paid for the cancellation. So for public service loan forgiveness, you supposedly have to make 120 payments or the equivalent, which right now, during the terms of the waiver, the equivalent of a payment includes a lot of things like the whole of the pandemic payment suspension since March of 2020 counts towards PSLF if you've been working. Same with those over 12 consecutive months or 36 cumulative months of forbearance, or there's certain, you know, so you can get credit for a lot of stuff that you couldn't get credit for before. But no, you don't have to have made for the Biden 10K, 20K cancellation, you don't have to have made any payments at all. You just have to have borrowed before June 30th. Now, if you have loans in a default status, you should also look potentially, because sometimes if you don't make payments right for a long enough time, the loans can go into default. So you should look at the information about the fresh start, which is going to have to work in conjunction with the loan cancellation. And you may have to wait for the loans to come out of default before the cancellation is applied. Edna asks whether you have to prove that you got a Pell Grant or whether they will just know. They know, so you can look it up according to the instructions I showed you, and they have that same record. So the Department of Ed is looking at that same data. Anali asks if 30 plus hours count as full-time if combining 2 part-time jobs towards the relaxed rules. Yes. Under either the relaxed waiver or under the regular rules of PSLF, 2 part-time jobs can be aggregated to meet the full-time requirement of 30 hours a week. So yes. So Linda wants to know where to find the application. The application for the one-time cancellation will be announced and released in early October. You want to subscribe to ed.gov/subscriptions to be told when it's available. The PSLF application is the same as the PSLF form, which you produce using the help tool at studentaid.gov/PSLF. Anna, Anna asks about, and hi Anna, I was just doing something with something about your loans earlier. I recall. I'm like, I know, I was just working on that. There is no specific waiver certification. It's the regular one, the PSLF form, and that's what will be used. So that's all you need to do. So you'll be considered for the waiver if you file that PSLF form before October 31st. But if you filed it a long time ago, you should file it again. So because if it was already processed under the non-waived rules or the non-relaxed rules, you need to file it again to get them to apply the relaxed rules. But you should also verify that all of your loans are direct loans and that you don't need to consolidate. Pablo asks if under an income-based plan, you're required to pay zero and you're working in public service, is zero counts as a payment for the 120 requirement? It does, yes. That was one thing we fought hard for way back in 2007 because I was working on these things then. Hello, Ashley. Ashley says, we applied a couple months ago for the waiver. Do we have to reapply to cover the months that have passed? Ashley, eventually you will need to file that form again to cover these months, but the months that since the pandemic payment suspension are going to count towards PSLF as long as you certify your employment. So you don't need to have the waiver applied to it. It's really important that you file a PSLF form for any employment you've had since October 1st, 2007 through March of 2020 when the pandemic payment suspension started, or if you never filed one before, to file one during the terms of the waiver before October 31st. And so yes, eventually you will have to file another form to cover these months, but you don't have to do it now. There's not any urgency for that. Sandra's having an issue. She had filed the form to FedLoan back in February and hasn't had it processed, and now Mohila has taken over the account. Yes, file another form with Mohila, absolutely. So FedLoan's been getting out of the servicing business. They've been transferring people to Mohila. FedLoan did a terrible job all along on this program as part of why they are leaving and everything else, because it's just been a major disaster. Absolutely file it again with Mohila. And this time upload it to your Mohila account, and then watch to see that your payment count gets updated eventually, and do that before October 31st. Karina asks if the waiver includes grace periods. It does not. A grace period is the 6 months after graduating before payments are required, and there is only one way to get that period to count, which is to consolidate, which will end the grace period. It's too late to do anything about it now. If that is in the past, grace period does not count, even if you were working. Okay, let me finish my last couple slides and then I'll take as many more questions as I can. I won't be able to reach all the questions as much as I would like to. There's just so many of us with these needs. I do want to re-emphasize that all questions, well, not all, many good questions are answered on those URLs that I gave you, and in more or less satisfying ways, but I'll get to as many questions as I can. I do want you to know that between the terms of the limited waiver, which is ending on October 31st, and new regulations for the program, there may be a weird period of time where the old, more stringent requirements apply, and before the new regulations take effect. We have reviewed and commented on proposed new PSLF regs that are much better than the old regs, but are not as generous as the waiver. So hopefully the department is going back and improving them from the drafts based on our comments. We expect final rules to be published likely in November, and then to be effective probably not until next summer, although we've argued that they should be fast-tracked to avoid this weird window where old stringent rules apply. That information is not yet available. I know that my friends at the Access to Justice Commission Foundation and otherwise will make this new information available to you as soon as it's out. I will certainly be happy to do another session when we know what that stuff is. But if you're somebody who is not getting all the way to forgiveness before the waiver is over, first of all, do the stuff I told you to do to get the waiver applied, and then recognize that starting January, when payments resume, you need to probably be enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan and making payments of what is due, likely on time, although there's going to be less nitpickiness about what counts as a payment. But you'll need to make payments every month. And you'll also need to file those PSLF forms to document your employment and you'll need to monitor on MOHELA's site, because your loans will be transferred to MOHELA, whether they are counting your payments properly. They have something called the payment tracker, and that's what you want to look at. Also, we've been told that there will be a new income-driven repayment plan unveiled anytime soon. And again, that's going to be proposed regulations that will initially be published. There'll be a period of public comment, and then there'll be final regulations. It is likely that this plan will become available next summer, but it is possible that it will be fast-tracked and made available sooner. Everybody should evaluate it. So whatever plan you're in now or you enroll in for the start of payments, you should keep your ear to the ground about a new repayment plan. And as soon as we know the details, we'll make them available to you. It's mainly going to help folks with undergraduate loans more than folks with graduate and professional loans, but it's likely to still be good for people with graduate and professional loans, maybe even like demonstrably better than any of the existing plans. Although they really are trying to sort of carve it out so that it's really undergraduate borrowers who benefit the most. So the devil will be in the details, as is often the case. And so, stand by for more information on that. Put a tickler in your calendar for like June that says like, hey, self, figure out what the deal is with this new income-driven repayment plan. Like, go and like do some searches and look at the studentaid.gov website. That is the best place to get reliable official information. I want to briefly mention there is this fresh start for loans that are in default. This is super important if you're somebody who is dealing with this. Visit the website and find out more about that. Don't miss the opportunity. And if you're someone who works with others, please also get this information to them. There are many people who are facing default who can benefit from this, but they may well need to take action. I encourage you also, if you care about student loan policy, if you think that access to education matters, do some research, figure out which representatives in our democracy care about those things as well, and vote. Encourage others to vote, because these issues are really of significance to many of us, and that's the best way that we can have our voices heard. Okay, I am going to start. So Carolina, the Fresh Start does not exactly include Perkins loans. Perkins loans are very special in that they are campus-based federal student loans. So, but a Perkins loan that is in default could be consolidated into a direct loan, and that could cure the default on the Perkins loan. If you have other loans to include with it, and that may well be the right path for you. But also check to see Perkins loans have some cancellation provisions of their own that could apply. Also, that info is at studentaid.gov as well. Kate asks if there's any hope to get credit for payments made while a contractor for a nonprofit. Kate, there is a glimmer, a tiny glimmer. It's not even really quite a glimmer of hope on that. I argued strongly for it during the negotiated rulemaking sessions and was shot down. But many influential commenters, we did some organizing and some work on commenting particularly on that problem. So what Kate is bringing up is that people who are not directly employed, but who are working on contract for qualifying public service employers have been left out of PSLF. The statute does not support that exclusion in my view. And so we're hopeful that the rewrite of the proposed regs will allow at least some contractors in certain situations to qualify. I have and would and will again argue for that to, if that even happens, to be retroactive. If it doesn't happen, there's also some potential conversations about other ways to try to force their hand in that regard. So like, yeah, there's a little tiny bit of hope, but it's not, uh, it's not a lot. Yes, so yes, you should apply for an income-driven repayment plan before January. That's right. You could go ahead and do it now, and you still won't have to pay until January. And you can do that at the studentaid.gov site. That's the best way to do it, and that'll be good. Arians asks if loans are already consolidated, do we still do the PSLF? Yes, you should still file the PSLF form if you've been in a public service job, even if you don't need to consolidate or you've already consolidated. So Elizabeth, yes, a Stafford subsidized loan is not a direct loan unless it says it's a direct loan on the studentaid.gov site. And yes, that's one that would need to be consolidated in order to be qualifying for PSLF and the limited waiver. And we are just about at the end of our payment time. But I do want to mention, several people have asked, so I want to say the period of the COVID payment suspension is going to count towards public service loan forgiveness as long as you document your employment. You don't have to have made payments. You don't have to have been enrolled in a repayment plan prior. Some of that we thought maybe would happen at the beginning of the payment suspension. There was some uncertainty about that, but now that is a done deal. So guys, please help get the word out to people about this stuff. I'm going to be sending you, or my platform will send you, a link to this recording since you are registered. Feel free to share it broadly. Tell everybody you know. Let's get this loan forgiveness going. Let's help each other out, and let's vote. So yay, thank you, Texas Access to Justice Foundation. Awesome talking to all of y'all. Have a good one.